Hello, all. Very good morning. Thanks for joining the session. Let me share my screen. Fine. In our last session, we started writing the Spring Web MVC application to see the issues, not issues, implementation challenges or the implementation burden on the developer. So we have seen what the developer need to be do, right? And that means in order to create the Spring Web MVC application, a simple Spring Web MVC application, the developer need to write the controller, developer need to write the dispatcher servlet, developer need to write this view layer, and also developer need to take care of the dependencies of a particular version with which he can develop this application. So dependencies management also the developer need to take care of. So these are the things we discussed, and with these things, let us implement the simple project. Let us implement the simple Spring Web MVC project, and the same Spring Web MVC project, let us implement with the Spring Boot, and then we'll see how Spring Boot is helping the developer to do a rapid application development. So as part of that, in the last session, we have created the project that is the Shopify e-commerce, and in that project, we have taken the dependencies with the different Maven scopes. One is with the provided, second one is with the compile. And about these Maven scopes, I believe I already have discussed in detail, like what is the provided scope and then what is the compiled scope. So now let us go, and then after taking this dependency, the next step is what? Go and then write the controller. So for that, we have written a controller and we added an annotation called @controller. So this is a stereotype annotation. This is a stereotype annotation. And this stereotype annotation, we need to always fix at the class level. Now here what we will write is, let us write one simple method. So just public, let us write one simple method, public string view, let's say view homepage, just in case, view homepage, and let us return home. Okay, just the name of the view I am typing, and then request mapping is empty. Let's take empty request mapping now. So view homepage is returning the page details. Go to this architecture, controller will returns the view information back to this dispatcher servlet. So this controller is returning the view information, view name back to this dispatcher servlet. So dispatcher servlet will do what? Dispatcher servlet will go to view layer. With the help of the view resolver, it resolve the actual view name. That means here view name we have taken home, but originally what we will do is that with that view name, let us take JSP. So for that, let me go here, and then there is J2EE tools, just generate a deployment descriptor. So this will generate the web.inf for us, web app web.inf for us. We are not using web.xml, so let us delete it. And here let us create one folder inside in it called, the folder name is called views. Let us create one folder inside in it. The folder name can be anything, but let me give it as a views. And here let me take the JSP with the same name. So let me take the JSP with the same name as that of I'm returning from the controller, just home.jsp. Now the JSP is created, home.jsp. So in this controller, what we will do is, let us just write some sysouts, meaning printing. I'm in home controller, and let's go to this view page, and here let us write. I mean, this is the home page. This is the home page. A simple home page. We have simple JSP, home.jsp we have taken. And now carefully observe, please. Carefully observe, please. Go to this diagram. So as I said, we have a dispatcher servlet. We should be configure this dispatcher servlet. So now we have written this controller, then we have written this view, isn't it? Then next step is what we have to return this dispatcher servlet. So in order to write that dispatcher servlet, let me take one more package here called config. So let me take one more package here called config. Just let me take one more package called config. In this config, let us write one more class called dispatcher servlet. So let us say our application is vShopify. So vShopify dispatcher servlet. It should have to extend abstract annotation config dispatcher servlet initializer. So this also we need to write, right? So this is also we need to write. So abstract annotation dispatcher servlet is also we need to write. Fine. Here root configuration classes, servlet configuration classes, servlet mappings. So let us define this servlet mapping. It is a string array. So new string. Let us take it as slash anything, any request coming to the application need to be taken by this dispatcher servlet. The same you can take here. Any request which is coming to the application first need to be taken by this dispatcher servlet. That is what we have mentioned here. Any request that is coming to this, any request that is coming to the application, it should have to take by the dispatcher servlet. So that is what we have mapped here. Then dispatcher servlet should have to be forwarded to a particular controllers, right? So there might be one or many controllers. So we should not always give only one controller name. So in order to identify the many controllers or many configurations, let us write one class called vShopify app config. vShopify app config. So what this app config will do is, it is a configuration class, and what it will do a component scan. So which it will do component scan? It will do the component scan on the base package com.vshopify.retail.com. So this it will do the component scan, so that in this package it will identify the components. That means controller is also component, isn't it? So it will be identified. Now dispatcher servlet also need to be identified. So let us make it as a component. It is also a component. So this is one component. Dispatcher servlet is one component. Now it will be also identified. Then what we will do is, there is one more thing also. Just let me refer this documentation. So we have to write the dispatcher servlet. Just let me go ahead. So JSP we have written, and then controller we have written, and then the this we need to write. We have written the application config, but we have to extend it with the WebMVC configure adapter. So no need to be extended in the case of no customizations. So let us extend it with the WebMVC configure adapter. So whatever the app config.java we have written, right? So let us extend it with the WebMVC configure adapter. Why? Because why we need to extend it? Because to customize the WebMVC configurations, and also we need to enable the WebMVC. See how the developer is writing the configurations, carefully observe, right? So here what we need to do, we need to take this internal resource view resolver. If you can see, DispatcherServlet requires this view resolver information, isn't it? So this view resolver information we have to configure. Why? Because from the controller only view name is given to the DispatcherServlet. From the controller only view name is given to DispatcherServlet, but with that name, what is the JSP, where it is located exactly, will be identified by this view resolver only. So for that reason, we also need to configure the view resolver. So let us take one view resolver called internal resource view resolver. Internal resource view resolver. So let's say it has a view resolver, and here let us create an object for this internal resource view resolver. So view resolver is equal to view resolver is equal to new internal resource view resolver. Now let us return this view resolver. This view resolver is not the Spring Bean by default, so we have to register it as a Spring Bean. And then this view resolver will identify the view names by looking in the directory web.inf and then views slash, and then in that directory it will look up for the pages which are suffixed with the .jsp. That's it. Now what will happen? So we have configured the view resolver, and this view resolver will be used by this DispatcherServlet to identify the exact view name which is matching with this home controller. So the flow is what? When any request will be given to DispatcherServlet with that request it will verify any controller is there or not, any handler is there or not. If any handler will match, then the handler logic will be executed, and then return type that the view name will be taken by the DispatcherServlet. And with that view name, it will go to view resolver and ask the view resolver to resolve the view name. So view resolver know where the views were. For example, in the view resolver, we have said views are in the web.inf views folder, and then they are suffixed with the .jsp. Now DispatcherServlet will go to this view resolver with the name home. Now what it will do? It will prefix /web.inf/views/home, then suffix with the .jsp, which is exactly there in our views directory. So in this views directory, it is exactly there, /web.inf/views/home, and suffix is the JSP. So exactly with the same name as that of the view name, the controller should have to be written it. Okay, now clear. So app configuration is what we have done. So remember how the developer is writing the configurations. The next step is what? This DispatcherServlet. So this DispatcherServlet also we have written, but we should not mark it as a component. So let me go to this DispatcherServlet. So let's mark it as a component. And this DispatcherServlet, now looking for the configurations. So let us see our configurations. New class configurations. Our configuration is this B Shopify app configuration, isn't it? Where we have done our application WebMVC configurations. So here we have done our WebMVC configuration. So this application configuration class we need to give to this servlet. Now the next step is, the servlet need to be created by the server, isn't it? So when we run this application in an external server, so external server need to create an object for this DispatcherServlet. So for that reason, what we can do is let us create the DispatcherServlet. One moment. This DispatcherServlet, yeah, for the object, for the DispatcherServlet, the object will be created by the server itself only. Okay, so let us not worry about it. I think we are good now. So for this servlet, the object will be created by the server itself, where we are deploying this object application. In which server we are deploying this application, that server will first create the object for this dispatcher servlet. Then as part of the dispatcher servlet object creation, this config class will also be created, so that it will be go here and then start creating as a Spring Bean. Okay, then it will scan all the components in this package, and also it will create the internal view resource resolver as a bean. Then finally the application will be started. So once the application is started, then when we give the request slash, then this dispatcher servlet already have the app config component scan, isn't it? So in this package, it will verify which is matching with the request mapping slash. So this is the controller which is mapping. So it will execute, and then home will be given to this dispatcher servlet. Now dispatcher servlet with that home, again it will go to view resolver and then resolve the view name. And finally the view, whatever it resolved, it will be given back to the customers or the users. So this is the flow. Let us try to execute this flow, but here we required a external server. To execute this, we required a external server. So in my case, I was already downloaded the external Tomcat. So let me also go and then get it in our project folder. Just give me a moment. Let me check there. I believe it should be there. Yes, Apache Tomcat. So this Apache Tomcat, now I will refer. Right, I already have downloaded Apache Tomcat 9. So this Apache Tomcat 9, I will refer. So run on server and add the server. Choose the server manually. This is not giving, but let me expand it. Yes, Tomcat 9 I would like to take. So Tomcat installation directory. Let me browse for the Tomcat installation directory. Yes, this is the one. Right, this is the one. And then click on next. And then now the project is added to the Tomcat. Then next finish. So now if we can observe carefully, this Tomcat server will instantiate the dispatcher servlet because it is a servlet. And then as soon as the servlet is instantiated, as process of its initialization, then this vShopify app config class will be instantiated as a Spring Bean. So this is the flow. Let us wait till it refresh the adapters. The IDP have the various servers support, right? So which server we will map, that server adapters will be downloaded and then it will be enabled in the IDE. So that is what it is now doing. Maybe it won't take much time. Let it refresh the server adapters list that it have within this IDE. So let us wait till it completes, and then it will start deploying our application. So we even can deploy the application by building it as a WAR file, and directly we can dump in the web apps folder of this Tomcat also we can do. But let us see. It is refreshing the it is refreshing the adapters list. Let it refresh. So it's about to complete. Yes, starting the Tomcat now. Starting the Tomcat now. If everything goes well, then we should have to see the view page. If everything goes well, then we have to see the view page. Let us see. Yes, registering annotated classes. Do you see? So at the time of application starting only, class path scanning and all is happening, and then it is registering the application components. Finally, it went to I'm in home controller. See this? This is the home page. So we got the home page. Now let us see this console. What happened here? The console. What happened here? Let us clearly understand. Okay, so these are all the Tom catalog. Till here it is the Tom catalog, and then you can see this one. Yes, so initializing the framework servlet. Initializing first, before this also you can see here Spring web application initializers detected on the class path. What does it mean? What does it mean? On the class path, web application initializers detected. So here if you can see, our DispatcherServlet is abstract annotation config DispatcherServlet initializer. It is one initializer. So when we go to here, abstract DispatcherServlet initializer, and when even extend it, abstract context loader initializer, web application initializer. So this web application initializer has been detected while deploying the application. So when this web application initializer will be detected, see this is an interface to be implemented in Servlet 3.0 plus environments in order to configure the Servlet context programmatically. So as opposed to the traditional web.xml file. So like how we will write the servlet in our traditional web.xml file, we also can write the same servlet by just implementing this web application initializer. So our server, meaning the Tomcat, JBoss, WebLogic, whatever the server, if the server will see this web application initializer, then it will start instantiating its implementation class. In our case, its implementation class is the abstract in vShopify dispatcher servlet, right? So if we can go here, console, first it detected the web application initializer. That is the reason DispatcherServlet. So when it initialized, it will call the DispatcherServlet init servlet pane. See this, initializing the Spring Servlet dispatcher. So now see this, it is initializing init servlet pane is called, and then initialization started, and then when the initialization started, see this annotation config application context is detected. How we detected? How annotation config web application context is detected? We know from our Spring Core sessions, we have seen when we use the annotations, then we have to use the annotation config web application context. Otherwise, we can use the application context, isn't it? Meaning XML class path XML application context, maybe we can use. But when we use the annotations, we have to use the annotation config web application context. That means what? Annotations are identified in our application. Okay, so then what will happen? Refreshing web application context for namespace dispatcher-servlet, and then what happened? Annotation config application context load bean definitions. So as part of loading the bean definitions, it is registering the annotated class. See this. This all process where it is happening in the initialization phase. It is happening. Initialization phase of the dispatcher servlet, it is happening. So in the initialization phase, this config classes will be loaded, and that is the reason this vShopify app config is detected, and then this is registered as a Spring Bean. Why? Because basically it is a configuration. So configuration again internally contains what? Component. So that is the reason first our vShopify app is registered as a Spring Bean. If you can see here, it is registered as a Spring Bean. Then after registering it as a Spring Bean, what happened? What happened is all the other beans also loaded from this one. All the other beans also loaded bean definitions from this vShopify app config. So what is this vShopify app config contains to load the other bean definitions? It contains the component scan. It contains the component scan. That means all the classes which are annotated with component or its subtypes in this package, meaning com.vshopify.retailecom. So in this whole package, whatever the classes annotated with component or maybe its subtypes, so those will get scanned and then also register as a Spring Beans into the Spring application context. Then bean annotated class also will be registered as a Spring Beans. So using this web app vShopify app config.class, all the Spring Beans are loading into the application context. That is what we can see here. So load the bean definitions. All the bean definitions were identified from this class and loading into the application context. Annotation config web application context is what? It is the implementation of the application context interface, isn't it? Now, this is done. That means all the beans were now registered into the application context. Then what? So then it started. See this request mapping handler. So request mapping handler, carefully observe. So method dot request mapping handler register mapped empty onto home controller view home page. That means what happened actually in this loaded bean definitions, in the home controller class, there is a request mapping annotation is detected, isn't it? So in this loaded classes, in the controller class, there is a request mapping annotation is detected. So once this request mapping annotation is detected, then request handler mapping object will be created. And this request mapping handler object will first register all the routes inside the application, meaning all the request mappings. For example, in this controller, I will take one more request mapping, or maybe I will take another controller also, maybe login controller, registration controller, or maybe other controllers also I can take. And in that controllers, I can take many request mapping methods with the mapping name. For example, this is what the mapping name I'm talking about. Maybe slash home, maybe slash view, like that. Many request mappings we can give. So all those request mappings will be registered by this request mapping handler. Okay, so this request mapping handler, as part of its registration, meaning request mapping path registration, slash home, slash login, slash register. So such request mapping path registration, it identified there is an empty path on the view home page. So this also it just registered. See this request mapping handler adapter. So init controller advice cache. So required classes are configuring. Controller advice is called advice and all is the AOP concept. So we might discuss those concepts later in time. But finally, what it does is with all these views loaded here, right? So finally, what it does, it does the initialization is completed. So DispatcherServlet initialization is completed. So what happened as part of the initialization? As part of the DispatcherServlet initialization, what happened? So let us see. DispatcherServlet initializations. So again, we will discuss when we start our Spring Boot Web MVC project, but just a glance, what happened? Number one, dispatcher dispatcher servlet is dispatcher servlet is instantiated and initialized. Dispatcher servlet is instantiated and initialized by the dispatcher servlet is instantiated and initialized by the server like Tomcat. This is the point number one. Next point number two. As part of the dispatcher servlet initialization, it loaded the app config. It loaded the app configurations class. Next, on top of app configurations class, we have given the component scan. And hints all the classes in the component, scan package were also loaded as Spring Beans. Next, fourth is what? Internal view resource resolver. Also loaded as Spring Bean into the application context. Application context nothing but the Spring Core container. And finally, initialization is completed. And before that, one more thing also happened. What is that? Request mapping handler is created and registered the all the request mappings given on all the controllers in the application. So in the application right now we have only one controller, and on top of the one controller we have given empty request mapping. If we have 10 controllers and 10 controllers will have the 10 different request mapping paths, then all those will also be registered by this request mapping handler. And finally, the dispatcher servlet initialization is completed. Now, when we give the request, so this is called initialization flow. So whatever the flow we have discussed is what, initialization flow. There is a request processing flow also. So this is the initialization flow. There is a dispatcher servlet request processing flow also. So what is that request processing flow? Let me go and then give the request. So just let me take this one and go to the browser, and then just let me enter. Now I'm giving the request actually, right? This is empty, slash is the empty request. So I'm giving the request. Now when the request is giving, the request is go to this home controller, isn't it? Now go here. Now we got the view page. So what happened when the request is given? So when the request is given, request went to this home controller, and the home controller is executed, and then it returns to the home page, and the dispatcher servlet with that home page, it will go to this view resolver and asked it for the view page, and then finally taken the view page and then rendered for us. Everything is happening through the dispatcher servlet only. Request taking, response giving, all the things are happening through the dispatcher servlet only. That is the reason this is called as a framework servlet or front controller of the application. Two things. It is identifying the controllers. It is identifying the views. Controllers are identifying with the help of the handler adapters. Views are identifying with the help of the view resolvers. in-depth of it, I will discuss when we start our project actually. But our intention is now, what are the configurations that a developer has to do when we do a traditional Spring WebMVC application. So if we recall all these efforts, what we have done, number one, step one, we have identified the Spring WebMVC dependencies with the valid versions. This is the step one we did. And next, step two, what we did. So we have written the controller class. Yes. And step three, what we did. Step three, we have written the view page, that is home.jsp we have written. And step four, what we did, we have written the DispatcherServlet configurations. Step five, what we have done, we have written the app configurations. We have written the app configurations and enabled a WebMVC configurations we enabled, and B, component scanning we enabled, because we have given explicitly the package name to be scanned, and also we have explicitly given @enable WebMVC annotation, right? And also we have created the internal view resolver and configured it as a Spring Bean. And what even we did, step 6, we have taken an external Tomcat server support, and deployed the application. In these all the flows, where is your business logic? These two only your business logic, correct? So writing the controller, writing the view, this only your business logic, but rest all are what? Configurations. Just to write a one line of code in the controller, just to write a one line of code in the JSP, to write a one line of code in the controller, this is, and just to write a one line of code in the JSP. We have set up the entire infrastructure. Of course, this is a one-time activity, but developer has to set up these infrastructure configurations, right? Developer also need to work on the configuration side when we will use the Spring traditional WebMVC application development. Clear, right? Is this clear, or any questions still here? Are you following me? Is this clear?
Sir, sir, in the old approach, basically we use web.xml file where we actually mention the DispatcherServlet path.
Correct.
Sir, here, sir, how that DispatcherServlet how it is getting that path in this approach?
Yeah. So in our earlier application, web.xml file we have taken. In that web.xml file, we used to configure the DispatcherServlet. So that DispatcherServlet, meaning the web.xml file, will be read by it is a deployment descriptor. So obviously web.xml file will be read by our Tomcat container. Correct? Now, as we are using the Zero-XML approach, so rather than looking for the web.xml file, first, when we use the Tomcat container and then deploy the application, then the Tomcat container inside our var file looks for the initializers. So that initializers will be in the our Spring Web MVC dependency, in our Spring Web MVC dependency. So Spring Web, just let me scroll little up. Spring Web MVC. In this Spring Web MVC, there is a servlet initializers. There is a servlet initializers. So this dependency, meaning this from this jar file, so it will identify the initializers. It will identify the initializers, and that initializers will first instantiated, meaning created. An object will be created for that. Like how the .xml file is read by the Tomcat container. Similarly here, this abstract annotation config dispatcher servlet initializer. This servlet initializer is equivalent to your web.xml file. Like how in the web.xml file, the servlet by servlet will be created by the Tomcat container. Similarly, in this servlet initializer, any class which is extending this servlet initializer will be created by the Tomcat container. An object for this will be created by the Tomcat container. Am I addressed your question? Is it clear? Still any question? Still not clear? Shall I explain one more time?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Could you please explain, sir, the last point, that abstract annotation config DispatcherServlet?
Okay. So usually in our earlier application configuration, we have web.xml, correct? And in the annotation based approach, here we have the web application initializer equivalent to the same initializer. Okay, so earlier we have the web.xml file. Now in place of it, we have the web application initializer. So where is that web application initializer? It is extending by this DispatcherServlet context loader listener, and then this web application initializer. This is the interface. So on startup, do you see the method on startup? That means on the server startup. So this web application initializer implementation classes will be instantiated by the server. Is this point clear, right? When the Tomcat server is starting on startup, it will create the object for the implementation class of this. So what is the implementation class of this? In our case, this is the implementation class of it, DispatcherServlet. So that means DispatcherServlet will be instantiated. So DispatcherServlet will be created. So once the servlet is created, then immediately in the servlet lifecycle, its initialization phase started. So that initialization phase, during the initialization phase, it identifies the servlet configurations. So like that, these servlet configurations are now identified. So while these servlet configurations are identified, it detected that there are annotations we have used. So annotation config application context will be created, and that will identify the meaning of these annotations basically. And then the Spring Beans will be loaded into the application context. And finally, application will be started. Clear? So yes, here only one point is, earlier it is web.xml, and now it is the web application initializer. And from where this web application initializer will be identified? From our class path. Class path meaning, if we can go here, just go little top, org.springframework.web is the dependency. So let us go to this Spring Web. Scroll down, go to the Spring Web. Here org.springframework.web we have. So inside this, we have the web application initializer. So this will be instantiated first, meaning when we deploy our application, this jar file also will go as part of the application deployment, isn't it? Because this is with the compiled scope. The scope of this jar file is the compilation by default. That means in the var file, whatever we prepared for this one, for this application, whatever the var file we prepare, or the application what we deploy into the container, that application also contains these libraries. So from these libraries, first this web application initializer will be created, meaning the instance object for this will be created. Okay, fine. Now this is what is internally happening in case of this traditional web application creation. But if you can understand here carefully, this is only our business logic, but rest all are not our business logic.
Sir, what is the purpose then enable web MVC annotation?
Could you repeat? What is the purpose?
Yeah, at that enable web MVC annotation.
Correct. So this will enable the web application. Web application meaning, if you can see, @enable web MVC is what it will create the web MVC configurations to us. Like DispatcherServlet is what one web MVC component. And then similarly, @controller annotations, meaning the request handler mappings, it created many other components, right? That means here request mapping handler mapping, request mapping handler adapter. So these are all will be created for us as part of this @enable web MVC annotation configuration. If we don't configure it, then these won't be created for us. So the meaning why we need to create, meaning why these need to be created, because these only will map the incoming request to a particular controller method. So these need to be created first. So when these will be created, this request handler mapping adapter, when this will be created, when we annotate it with the @enable web MVC. Okay, fine. Now, if we can go here and then see, so this is only the business logic we have written, and rest all are just configurations. Now let us do the same to same application. Let us do with the Spring Boot, and we'll see how much time it will take and how it will. So first, let me stop the running server. At this moment, I have not discussed about what is Spring Boot. At least definition we have discussed, but not more than the definition we have discussed, right? Just a definition we have drafted, and how to create the Spring Boot project, how many ways we can create the Spring Boot project, what is the structure of the Spring Boot project. These are all the things we have not discussed, we yet to discuss. Okay, so, but for now, to differentiate the effort that has been taking off when we create the Spring Boot project. So for now, I will directly create the Spring Boot project. And later in time, I will explain how to create the Spring Boot project, the ways to create the Spring Boot project. Okay, so just right click on this white space and then click on new, go to Spring Starter project. And let us give the name of the project. So Shopify Commerce Web Boot. Okay, Commerce Web Boot. So group, the sponsors for us is the DURGASOFT, in which we are developing this application, and the package is com. Just in a moment of time, the same package structure I would like to give, just to give you the feel like the same we are creating, just to give you the feel like the same application we are creating. I would also like to use the same package. So let me again create the application now. So new starter project and give the name Shopify Commerce MVC boot. So group ID is com.dsoft. Package we can give anything, but I would like to give the same package. Com. Hey, this component scan and bin we discussed in our Spring Core sessions, right? And whoever have joined for the demos, right? For them, I'll explain again the details in the coming up sessions. Okay, so package com.
Sir, change the group name to com. SOFT.
Okay, fine. Com dot and com.vshopify.retail e-commerce. I explained about this package, right? It should be 3 words. It should be 3 words. Now next, here, let us create it as a var file. Okay, and the Java version, let us take as mine is Java 11. Okay, now next, go next. Here, what I will do is, now see the Spring Boot version is 2.7.0, and coming up, we have 3.0 also. It is now in the development, and their milestone M3 nothing but milestone. If you see anywhere the M1, M2, M3, these are called the milestones, meaning their long-term goals to release those kind of versions. So Spring Boot stabilized version now is 2.7.0, and also Spring Boot guys were Spring Boot developers have a milestone that is 3.0.0, which is in now development. That is the meaning of snapshot. That is the meaning of M3. M3 meaning milestone. So let us go with the 2.7.0, which is the stabilized version, because 2.7.1 is still under development. Snapshot meaning it is under development. Now let us take this 2.7.0, and here there is a starter. So these are called as starters. So let me choose this Spring Web Starter. That's it. I just have chosen a Spring Web Starter. Just I'm creating the project. That's it. Only while creating the Spring Boot project, I have chosen one starter called Spring-Boot-Web-Starter. Spring-Boot-Web-Starter or Starter-Web. Only I have chosen that starter, not anything. Okay, now our project is creating. Let it create. 26% is completed.
Sir, so the first project was only the Maven project only. It was not Spring Boot project. The first one, Shopify.
First one, correct. First one is not Spring Boot. It is just a Maven
MVC.
MVC Maven project. Exactly correct. So it is getting importing. So here, if you can see, there is a process actually how the Spring Boot project will be created. All these things we will discuss in our coming up sessions. Probably tomorrow we will discuss. By the way, tomorrow, shall we connect at 8 a.m. just an half an hour before? Usually we are connecting at 8:30, right? Let us connect at 8 a.m. and then usually we are completing the sessions by 9:30, 9:45, right? Tomorrow also let us complete the session by the 9:30, 9:40 or maybe 10, but just connect an half an hour before to complete this Spring Boot discussion, so that Monday onwards we can start our vShopify project using the time leaf and then the web MVC. So is it okay? Are you able to connect just an half an hour before, like 8 a.m.? Okay, yeah, thank you so much. 8 a.m. So just an half an hour before to your regular session. Whoever are also attending for the demo, those are also join on the same link tomorrow at 8 a.m. The demo link will be valid for tomorrow also. So whoever are interested and would like to see what is Spring Boot and all, you also can join at 8 a.m. not 8:30. Fine. So see this, it is creating. Now 79% of the content is downloaded. Now you can see some jar files it is downloading, right? When the project is creating. Jackson data bind, some other jar files. So we will discuss all these things in detail in our tomorrow session. But I just have added only one starter, that is Spring-Boot-Web-Starter. Only one starter I added. It is downloading all its related dependencies using the transitive dependencies approach. Maven transitive dependencies approach. Now see, all the dependencies are downloaded. Now the Java documentation related to those jar files is now downloading. It won't take much time, but you can see Tomcat embedded also downloading. It won't take much time. Let us wait. Already 39% is completed. So let us wait till it completes. Fine. There are a lot of interview questions in the Spring Boot. Each and every concept you will get interview question. In depth of every concept we will discuss. Fine. So let us complete it, meaning the 55%, 57 completed. Let us wait till it completes. So the documentation downloading is happening. Don't disturb in the middle. Let it complete all the things, right? And then set up the application perfectly. Done. Now the application has been set up perfectly. So we got the boot as the name here. And there is a structure created. There is a structure created. And see this, by default, the application.java file is created. And as we mentioned it as a web starter, that means in the pom.xml file, right, I have chosen the web starter. Sir, what is starter, sir? Again, tomorrow we will discuss in depth of it. I will discuss. So just the Spring Web starter I added. What is starter? How the Spring Boot structure? All these things we will discuss tomorrow. But now if you can see, we were added the pom.xml file, meaning in the dependency we were added in the pom.xml file. And then we just have, by default for us, the servlet initializer is created. We have not created. It is created. Spring Boot itself is created. Now what we will do, just let me create one more package here. One more package called com.retail.econtroller. So in this controller, we already have written the controller here, right? Just to save the time, the same controller I will paste here. Just controller, that's it, nothing, just only controller I pasted. And the JSP, let us take the web app and then web-inf, same structure let us take, because JSP is also we have to write, correct? So for that, let me take this same to same web-inf folder from here to here, meaning from our traditional web MVC to our here. Just let me take the JSP. That's it. I was taking the JSP. And dispatchers view resolver configurations we have done, right? Here also we have to do the view resolver configuration just by mentioning spring web. We no need to create any class, any bean. We no need to define anything. It will by default gives us. So just spring dot just let me take. So spring dot MVC dot prefix, spring dot MVC dot view dot prefix. Just I will give web inf slash view slash, and similarly let's give spring dot MVC dot view dot suffix. Just to give the dot JSP. That's it. So what I have done, number one, created the controller. Number two, created the JSP. Number three, just configured in the in the application.properties, configured what is the views where they are, right? And also let us run this now. Boot project. That's it. One controller we have written, one JSP we have written, and where the JSPs were, we just have configured. That's it. We have not written app configurations. We have not written DispatcherServlet configurations. We have not mentioned enable web MVC. We have not mentioned component scanning. And we even have not defined the view resolver as a bin. No, we have not done. We just have written the controller and then JSP and then added these 2 lines of code. That's it. Now, if you can see, the application is started on 8080 port. Strange, we even have not used any external Tomcat, because Spring Boot is by default providing for us a Tomcat web server, not application server. So that is the reason. Now it is running on 8080, right? So let us go to here and let us hit this 8080. That's it. We have not seen our controller is calling here. If you can see. Maybe our controller is calling. See this? Our controller is calling, but view is not rendered. JSP is not rendered. Why? Because the Tomcat by default providing by the Spring Boot, right? This is not a web server. This is not an application server. This is just a web server. So it don't have the JSP engine in it. For that, what we have to, Spring Boot embedded Jasper dependency. So Spring Boot embedded Jasper. So this embedded Jasper dependency we need to add. So this is very important actually. And if you can see, the Tomcat is running with the version 9.0.63. Same version of this embedded jar file we have to take, 9.0.63. Right? Just let me copy this.
Sir,
then paste here.
Sir, why this Jasper dependency is required?
I will explain. First, let me add it. Then let us execute. Then I will explain why I am adding this. Because Spring Boot itself is giving the Tomcat. No external Tomcat we were added. It just to focus on the business logic. But as we are using the JSP, that JSP container or JSP container is not there.
I didn't understand that.
The JSP container is not there in our Tomcat. So that is the reason, meaning the Tomcat provided by the Spring Boot is just a web server, not application server. The web servers contains only the servlet container, not JSP container. And hence, we extended our default Tomcat server with the JSP container. Can you please mute? Can you guys please mute? I'll explain again about it in a moment of time once we have configured it. Done. Now
I didn't understand that.
Now just go here and then type 8080. Now we can see this is home page. Awesome, right? We have not done anything. Just we added the business logic. And this little configurations we do just extension of this embedded Tomcat. So by default, okay, so I will explain here. If a web server or application server, so assume this is the server. Okay, this is the server. This server is a web server. It contains only the servlet container inside in it. It contains only the servlet container. Servlet container only inside in it. That means it is only able to identify the request mappings, servlets and all, because this is a web server. And if something is said to be application server, if something is said to be application server, then that application server contains both, meaning the servlet container and also the JSP container. So let me copy this servlet container and also the JSP container. So both will be there in the application server. So this is the JSP container. JSP container meaning it will be able to process, identify the JSPs and then parse the JSPs and then render the JSPs and all these things. So this is called as what? Application server. This is called as what? Application server. Application server. So by default, Spring Boot is offering us a Tomcat, isn't it? That Tomcat is just a web server. But we have used the JSP, correct? So just to extend this web server to add with the JSP container, we have added that Jasper dependency library additionally. That means in this web server, we also now adding the capability of the JSP container, but still it is a web server, but we are extending it to have the JSP capabilities. That is the reason after we added this Jasper, embedded Jasper dependency, we got the response of the JSP. But even though if we don't add, our controller is already executed, isn't it? Though we have added that or not added, when we give the request, our controller is executed. Our controller Tomcat that is coming up with the Spring Boot is just a web server. Okay, but now if you can understand carefully what we have done. So we have identified the Spring MVCs. No, we have not done this. What we done? We just have created one controller class with the Spring Boot. We just have created one JSP. That's it. And possibly we have configured this internal resource view resolver configurations. Internal view resolver configurations. Right, where the views were. That's it. These only three things we have done. Only these three things. These two are now called as a business logic. That means what? With the Spring Boot application, the developer only focused on the business logic. But in the traditional WebMVC application, the traditional WebMVC application development, the developer has to concentrate on business logic plus the configurations part also. But in the Spring Boot, the developer has to just concentrate on the business logic, but not on configurations. So that is the reason, as configurations by default giving by the Spring Boot, and developer need to focus only on the business logic implementation. Spring Boot is said to be a rapid application development utility framework. Got it right? So that's all for today. And tomorrow we can discuss a lot of things in the tomorrow session. Yes, in application, this is what I have added. Internal resolver configurations, we added in application.properties. Only these three steps only we have performed, but we have not created application.properties. So, but we have not created any DispatcherServlet class, any app configurations. We have not defined WebMVC. Component scan we have not defined. Internal resource view resolver we were not exposed as a Spring Bean using Hibernate bean annotation. No, and we have not used external container. That means external Tomcat. So just we have done these two business logics we have written, and two lines of code we have added in the application properties. That's it. Got it? Any questions? Your voice is breaking actually. Okay, fine. So that's all for today. And tomorrow, let us discuss in depth of what is Spring Boot, how it is handling the configurations internally. Though we have not provided any configurations like DispatcherServlet, how it has been created the DispatcherServlet, and how it has rendered the Spring Web MVC application. So tomorrow, let us discuss in depth of it about the Spring Boot. So that's all for today, folks. Anything else for me? Right.
Sir, as per your statements in Spring Boot, there is no concept of front control.
No, there is a front controller, but that front controller, we no need to write. Automatically, Spring Boot will configure it for us. There is a front controller. There is a component scan. There is a Hibernate enable WebMVC. So whatever we have taken here, these are all also there in the case of Spring Boot as well. But we no need to write. Spring Boot internally, it will automatically configure them for us. But still there will be a framework controller. All these are there actually, but we have not written. It is taken care by the Spring Boot itself. Got it? Yeah. Your voice is breaking. I think your voice is breaking. Your voice is breaking.
I wrote my answer, sir. I wrote my answer chat box. So can you read it, sir?
I'm so sorry. Your voice is breaking actually. I think it's for me only or not for all of you, but it's breaking. Can you type in the chat?
Sir, could you please share the document, sir, which you are just following while you are preparing the web application?
Sure, I will share these documents for the registered students only. Sorry to say like this, but that is the protocol. So, for sure.
Sir, I'm a registered student, sir.
Sure. What I will do, the documents, the registered, meaning newly added students are there, right? Maybe 1 or 2 members, or maybe 5 or 10 members. I don't know what is the count of them. For the newly added members, I will share all the documents by the end of tomorrow, because I will get a list from the backend team. Then I will provision the documents for you. Is that okay? Fine, right?
Sir, hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, will you provide recordings daily, sir, so that we can practice?
Yes, daily recordings will be provided. But sometimes what will happen, backend team, if any technical issues, sometimes 1 or 2 times maybe it get delayed. But for existing students, existing batch, so it is uploading on daily basis. Maybe within a gap of 4 or 5 hours. I'm sure 4 or 5 hours, not more than 8 hours, but those are uploading. Sometimes due to some reasons it are delaying, but recordings are uploading.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, folks, that's all for today.
Sir, one doubt for me. Sir, actually, I already registered from the May month 8:30 batch. I will be included in this batch also, right?
So you are already registered for the 7 AM batch?
No, sir, 8:30 batch.
Yeah, you will be. So that will be continued. You guys are already provisioned with all the details, materials and all. So we will.
Sir. No, sir, actually, I got the link from DURGASOFT that to pay the payment because I already paid.
That is, you ignore it. You can ignore.
Okay.
Who are already
and
done.
I will be getting the new Zoom link for the upcoming classes, right? For Spring Boot and microservices.
Correct. From Monday onwards, we will be go to our earlier link only, where we were attended Spring Core for 1 month, right? So we again will go back to that link only from Monday onwards.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, folks. So for the payment, can you please call to this number? One moment. The payment and all, I will give one number. You just call to that number and then complete your registrations. Just give me a moment. I will share that number in the chat. So just give me a moment. I will share that number in the chat. Who are interested, just go and then complete your registrations. Let me ping that number in the chat right away. I'm just taking that number just in a moment. That number is not handy with me. I'm just taking that number. Yes. So it is, anyone, can you note down? And also I will give here 9246212143. 9246212143. Related to the payments or any queries or any concerns, questions, anything, you can call to Madam. Madam will answer your questions.
Hello, sir. This is Raju.
Yeah. Hi, Raju.
Yeah, I have joined recently, like 2 days ago. So it is looking very new to me.
Do you know the Spring Core, Raju?
No, sir. No.
Do one thing. Follow the Spring Core videos. Maybe tomorrow and then day after tomorrow. From Monday onwards, you will be get familiarized.
Okay. Then are there any steps to install the application like you did till now?
Yes. I will explain. That is the reason. Just we understood the difference between the traditional WebMVC and then Spring Boot, right? So tomorrow, actually, Monday onwards, actually, we will start our project. So when we start our project actually on the Spring Boot, then I will say all the steps, how to install IDE, how to set up the project and all.
Okay. So this is all about front-end development, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, both front-end plus back-end, full stack.
Both. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, folks. I'm stopping my screen share and then see you tomorrow at the 8 AM. Thank you.